1 in a trillion, 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 trillion. If you're counting, that's 13 trillions. And according to Brobst, that's the probability that all of the prophecies about Jesus would be fulfilled. You probably wouldn't bet on those odds, but according to Christian tradition, 2,000 years ago, all the prophecies about Jesus was fulfilled whenever he was born. So I did some research, and I had a little bit of background growing up Christian and being a Christian myself, so that helped out. But I wanted to dig in further to see what historians and other accounts said about the birth of Jesus. So today we're going to talk about the setting around Jesus' birth, the science behind it, as well as the impact that it had on history. So first of all, Jesus' birth was notable. We see that in Matthew 2, 1 through 3, with King Herod, who was king at the time, taking note of his birth, as did the people of Jerusalem, as well as the Magi. Now, according to O'Callaghan, astrology was pretty big back then, and so the Magi were probably into astrology whenever they followed the star to get to Jesus. And according to astrology, Jupiter is associated with royalty, and on April 17th of 6 BC, Jupiter, the moon came in front of Jupiter, which could have been a sign to the Magi about Jesus' birth. So now that we have learned about a couple of the settings surrounding the birth of Jesus, let's transition into learning about the science of the birth of Jesus. So scientifically, the birth of Jesus was impossible. We see that in Matthew 1 that he was born of a virgin. And scientifically that's impossible, but the University of Cambridge did a study and came to the conclusion that it could have been parthenogenesis, which is a scientific explanation for a virgin birth, where the female doesn't need the sperm to fertilize the egg in order to give birth. So that's one explanation that could have happened for the miraculous birth of Jesus. So now that we've learned about a little bit of the science surrounding the birth of Jesus, let's look into the significance surrounding the birth of Jesus. So you probably heard of AD and BC, right? Well, according to Owen Jarvis and Robert Kuhlman, AD means Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord, and BC means before Christ. So these two important factors in history have markers back in Christianity. So Jesus' birth was a marker in history, even though his birth wasn't the middle of BC changing to AD, it still was a marker of history. To wrap it all up, the birth of Jesus was unique. And we see that through Herod noting Jesus' birth, as well as the Magi, as well as the people of Israel. And we see that through the birth of Jesus, being that he was born of a virgin, which is scientifically impossible, but miraculous that it even happened. And then we also see Jesus' impact through history, through the changing of AD, through the changing of BC to AD. And against all odds, that 1 in a trillion, a lot of trillions, the prophecies about Jesus was fulfilled whenever he was born. Jesus' birth was a miraculous marker in history.